Good morning, everyone. Please remain standing for prayers by my chaplain, Reverend Harold Thomas, before we start the meeting.
Let us pray. On this very beautiful day, we give thanks for all the blessings of this life, and we give thanks too for our County Borough Council of Torfaen, and for all that they do, all their work that they undertake on our behalf. And this morning particularly, once again, as they assemble here in the chamber, we do pray that your presence will be with them. So we thank you for all of the councillors, and we also give thanks to the borough staff for all the work that they do, once again supporting the councillors in all of their deliberations. This morning, we also give thanks for the life of Linda Willis's father, and I'd like us to remain and remember in silence for just a moment for Linda and the family at this very difficult time on the death of her dear father.
Please be seated. I'd like to give special thanks to Harold for stepping in at such short notice. Thank you very much. I'd like to remind you all this council meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so can you please note we're all on camera. Be aware that you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. There's no need for members to stand because cameras are focused on people sitting down. And remember to speak clearly into your microphone, please. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting today, councillors, officers, members of the press and public, members of Grifstown under 14s, and anyone watching the meeting via the webcast. Please can all mobile phones and other noisy devices be put on silent. If there's an emergency alarm, follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic car park. If we have any motions or amendments during the meeting, I will need them to be clear, please, before we go to the vote. Please note there has been a challenge to one of the Cabinet's decisions on the 15th of July. A meeting of the Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be convened later this morning. We'll go to agenda item 1, attendance. The attendance register is going around the room. Please can all members sign it and send it on. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Interim Committee and Members Services Manager Ros Gwyn, have we had any apologies?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have apologies from Councillors Pam Cameron, Giles Davis, Kelvin Harnett and Mike Jeremiah.
Members, are there any other apologies?
Councillor Raymond Mills.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Deputy Monitoring Officer Della Harris, do you have any advice for members, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not aware of any specific interest, having looked at the agenda for members to declare. I have, however, been informed by Councillor Rees this morning that he does wish to declare an interest in relation to item number 19 on the agenda, which is the members' questions, and specifically in relation to Councillor Rees's question at number 2. So I understand that can be declared. Apart from that, Madam Mayor, I'm not aware of any other interest. Thank you.
I declare I have a personal interest, as am my governor in a secondary school at Gwynllw.
Members, do you have any other interest to declare? Can you make sure any interests are written on a normal form, please? Okay. Agenda item... Right, we're going to do a presentation to Griffithstown AFC Under-14's treble-winning season. Can I ask representatives of Griffithstown AFC Under-14s to come down to the front, please? Councillor Hunt, would you like to say a few words?
If the team want to come down to the front and the coaches, that'd be great. Ask Pete when they've come in. Right, thanks for coming in, lads. Now, just to introduce you, back in 2011 to 12, this team was beginning to show great potential by winning both the Under-12s Torvine Football League and the Cup Double. That season, the team won every single game. So in 2012-13, the lads were aged 12 and 13 and embraced the challenge of playing in the Under-14s League against older boys, achieving a respectable 4th place. This season, they've now become the first team in Torvine County Borough history to win the treble. They won the league, playing 18 and winning 18, scoring 156 goals and only conceding 7. They won the Torvine Junior and Youth Association Football League Under-14s League Cup, beating the Race AFC, 4-3 in the final at Cumbrand Stadium. And they won the Gwent County Football Association Under-14s Gwent Junior Cup, beating Killeen AFC 4-1 in the final at Lanwern School in Newport. The Under-14s are led by a dedicated team of coaches, Mark Jones, Gareth Richards and John Doolan, who provide a safe, friendly and fun environment where the lads can train and develop their skills and fitness. I'd also like to recognise the club's committee, Neil Beach, Gerald Davis and Neil Cummings, for their dedicated hard work behind the scenes for many years, providing the backbone of this fantastic football club that provides great opportunities for boys and girls to enjoy football at a local level. There's a lot said in the media about the elite level of football, but I really think the grassroots of the game are what's important, especially to us locally. So I think it's a good thing to do to recognise the achievements of a local team when they really do go above and beyond and have such a great achievement in the year. So I'd like to invite my ward colleagues Norma and Dave to come down and have a picture taken with the team.
Well done, boys. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 4, minutes from the 24th of June 2014. Can someone move that the minutes are correct, please?
Move.
We all agreed? Thank you, members. Agenda item 5, update on actions. Members, the updates on what has been done to implement our previous decisions start on page 35 of the agenda. Are there any comments or questions? Is everyone happy to note the updates? Thank you, members. They're noted. Agenda item 6, receipt of petitions. We have no petitions today, so we'll move straight on to the next item, which is agenda item 7, public question time. And there were no public questions received by the deadline for today, so we'll move straight on to the next one. Agenda item 8, announcements. Leader, do you have any announcements today,
Thank you, Madam
please?
Mayor. Well, first of all, this is the last council before the holidays. I hope everybody has a good holiday. One thing I want to mention, because I couldn't get there, and I've been asked to mention it by a number of people, and I'm sure Councillor Morby will want to make a comment at the end of this, is the opening of the new cycle track by John Griffiths down at the Boating Lake. That took place last week. It's a wonderful project, I know, because I walk it most Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings, early in the morning and in the week if I can, and I know lots of other people do as well. We ought to be very proud of that cycle route, because it goes all the way to Blenavon. But the new piece is something exceptional, and we're very proud of that. I just want to mention that to thank publicly John Griffiths for being involved and for coming along. And I know Councillor Morgan want to make a comment.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I attended the opening of the cycleway, but I was a little bit late because I made the foolish decision to decide to ride on my bike there. My bike actually had a puncture and I rode on my wife's, but I obviously wasn't, well, I'm not a very good cyclist anyway, but I managed to fall off on the brand new cycleway and damage my knees and my pride and my hands. Well, I'll explain a little bit more later. I eventually, having fallen off, arrived late, just as the Minister was saying what a safe cycleway it was, which I tried to disprove as I bled in front of him. But I actually was in a bad way. I didn't realise it at the time. The bleeding was nothing compared to what was apparently going on in my head. Anyway, what I want to do really is to pay tribute, I won't often say this, to Stuart Ashley for holding me up when I was sinking to the floor, but more particularly for what he did afterwards to the first aider on the day, a countryside ranger named Brian Arthur, who saw what was going on, realised that I was in a bad way, worse than I thought I was, and actually was there to support me when my legs and knees buckled beneath me. And he subsequently drove me home. He was in a van with a trailer, so he was able to take my wife's bike home as well. He was able to reassure my wife that although I looked pretty bad, that actually it wasn't dreadful. And he attended to me in extremely kindly fashion. And I was extremely grateful, although probably not in a fit state to express that as well as I could have and should have. So I'm taking this opportunity now to say to Brian Arthur in the countryside service how grateful I am, how grateful my wife was for the way in which he reassured her and me, and really to pay tribute to the first aiders, volunteers within the council, and he's not the only one, there are a number of them. We see their names on notices and we perhaps take it for granted. But in fact, when they are called to action, my experience at least is that they do a great job and help me very much. So I just want that recorded, really, that we appreciate them, and I'm sure council colleagues will agree likewise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morby. Chief Executive, do you have any announcement?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 9, the annual report on social care effectiveness. Sue Evans, Chief Officer, Social Care and Housing, can you present your report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you today. I know when you receive reports, particularly if they're more than 10 or 20 pages, it's difficult to try and capture the key elements. So thank you for that opportunity. Just on the first slide there, just a reminder of our function. What we do in social care and housing in particular is provide a voice, I think, for the most vulnerable in our borough. And very often these are people who, without the support of social care and housing and other parts of the council services, they may not have that voice. So I just wanted to remind you of that. And obviously supporting the vulnerable is one of the council's key priorities. So what we're doing on your behalf meets that strategic priority that we've already agreed. A lot of information is contained in the reports, and data is available on Ffynnon. I know you all have access now to Ffynnon, and in the various heads of service reports. So if you want more information, we can provide more information if you ask me for those reports. So I'm only going to try and pick out some of the highlights and the themes in some of the activities over the last year, and happy to respond to questions at the end. Just to remind you, it is a statutory requirement. Presenting the role of Director of Social Services as one of the statutory roles in the Council. This is an annual report. It's the 6th report for Torfaen, and if you remember, we were one of the first areas in Wales to conduct this new process of self-evaluation. So most other authorities in Wales, they'll be on their 5th report, so we did have a bit of a head start. And I think the report is written for the Council, but also interested stakeholders in Torfaen who are interested in the performance of social care in particular. So it's my formal account, developed from a wide range of evidence gathering and assessment of progress, things like internal and external audits, inspections, looking at our complaints, looking at compliments, looking at our performance indicators, service user and carer feedback, staff feedback as well. So, you know, it's a range of sources of information I use to triangulate the evidence to inform my judgment. It's also part of the formal statutory regulation and inspection framework, and you'll know that CSSIW come to the Council every year, and they'll be coming in autumn again, to reflect back on what I say in my report and what they've found in terms of their own inspections and reviews. And they will comment on how well my professional opinion aligns with their own assessment, and give me and the Council an evaluation of, you know, have we provided sufficient evidence. So, you know, it's almost like a check on, is my assessment robust? Can I evidence why I'm saying what I'm saying? And are the findings largely in line with what CSSIW will say? But we'll check that out in the autumn. And I guess I just want to say at this stage, when we're dealing with the private lives of individuals and families in the borough, you can imagine some of the sensitive issues that we're dealing with on a daily basis, particularly at the front line, our social workers, OTs and other professionals at the front line. And their experience of social care may be completely different because it is unique and personal to them. But I hope what you'll see in the report is an element of what we've captured as the voice of service users in there. So I think that's been a useful addition in this year. We've added more service users' voice and staff and partners' voice contained within the report, so you can see some of the comments that we do receive. Because very often we focus on the negatives, don't we? The red PIs or the complaints, when there is an awful lot of good stuff happening too. Just want to remind us all of the context. We probably don't need a reminder. So, you know, we did have relative protection in terms of the budget cuts that all council areas had to receive for managing our budgets last year. And, you know, we are grateful for that support, that we get that relative protection. But it does mean, despite that, because of the increase in pressures, increase in demand, you know, £2.6 million worth of savings, having to deliver that in 1 year is quite a tall ask, and that's going to get more and more challenging for all of us. The other thing to highlight, the economic climate is putting individuals and families under significant pressure. And if I just share with you there a couple of what we see as the outcome of that from demand on social care, the high-risk areas. Domestic abuse, it's well known that poverty, deprivation, lack of a job, lack of aspiration, domestic abuse is one of those factors that does increase. And you can see from some of the evidence there, referrals, for example, to our POVA team have increased. Things like financial abuse. It's hard to imagine that members of family may be financially abusing their loved ones. But when times are difficult, unfortunately, that is, what happens sometimes. The other element I think we see more of is carer breakdown or high risk of carer breakdown. So those are the areas we need to constantly monitor to see, what's happening out there in the community. We see that manifested in more referrals into our services. The other element, of course, is demographics, increasing number of people. Now, people getting older is good news. People living longer is good news. But it does mean that for some of those people who become more frail, there's an increased need for some social care support for some people. And similarly, if you look at the other age range, babies and children, babies surviving now disabilities and illnesses that 20 years ago probably they wouldn't have survived. So that's brilliant news from those individuals and those families, but it does mean it's more resource demand pressures. And we all know this, all of the public sector resources are reducing, so it does mean a collective effort. We can no longer, if ever we wanted to, just look from a social care and housing perspective or a council perspective. We need to look at what are the police doing, what's the fire service doing, what's the health service doing, how do we pool those resources and start thinking of them in a collective way. So when you're trying to deal with that sort of context and that sort of demand, you have to take a strategic approach. Otherwise, that's all you're doing is knee-jerk reaction and you're not sitting back and thinking strategically. So one of our key themes is to make sure we prioritise our statutory support and services to the most vulnerable and at risk of harm. But we do recognise that investment does need to be put in early intervention and prevention. So we have to balance out that immediate action and dealing with crises with some of the things that we need to do in terms of prevention and early intervention. And that means very often relying on other people's resources and asking people like families or the third sector to step up and meet some of those lower level needs where maybe a statutory care management approach isn't necessary. And that's something we're going to have to do more of. Difficult choices obviously have had to be made, done within a risk assessment framework. So whenever we make a decision to change somebody's package of care, work with a family to perhaps accept more responsibility for doing some things themselves, that you can imagine is a tough call. But it's a real strong negotiating opportunity and difficult time for individual frontline practitioners to have that conversation with those families where they may have had the same service for 10 years or more, and we're really having to look at, are the right services delivering the best outcomes for the people who need it most. And some of those policy choices that we've made already, things like looking at our eligibility criteria, they will be made to deal with the demand now, but also look future-proofing, if you like, to meet the requirements of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, and I'll say more about that later. All of that means, there's a constant need to manage that risk collectively with frontline staff, with providers, partners, and with families to better protect and promote independence. And that is a risk. We all manage risks every day in our lives. When we get in our car, we take that risk. And some of this is about turning some of that risk around so that the individual themselves start to manage and be responsible for that risk. Another strategic theme is about collaborating where it would add value. And certainly we've had the Joint Scrutiny Committee earlier this year where we all looked at all the various collaborations across the Council to just give ourselves a check. Are they still fit for purpose? Are they still giving us the outcomes we expected? And that we're going to see more of that, I think, in the future. And what we're trying to do, in a nutshell, when you look at it from an individual person point of view, is to avoid several agencies interfering, and I use that word deliberately, with families when a key worker role by one or other agency may be able to carry out a range of functions rather than repeat assessments being done, and that's the way we're trying to move forward. It's obviously important to focus on key performance indicators. We've got lots of them in social care and housing, So it's trying to make sure which are the ones we're going to focus on, the ones that are the reds, the ones that are intractable, trying to have a look at, see if we can shift some of those that seem to have been dogged. And improving quality rather than choice. I think in times of plenty, choice was being widened all the time. People had more and more choice. But we have to be realistic and think about the resource constraints that we have. But what we try and do now is making sure we improve the quality of interventions to promote independence or safeguarding, so that every penny we spent is as wise and effective as it can be. Some key messages then out of the report. I couldn't write this report without recognising the impact on the front line in particular. Caseloads are high, higher than we would want them to be. And that senior management oversight and regular supervision with case holders in particular and going up through the line so that it reached me. I do regular case audits. I meet with staff about particular cases that are troubling or difficult. So we do monitor that, monitor the impact on staff, monitor the impact on service users, carers, and our partner agencies, and that is a continuous balancing act. And one of the measures that I use to try and see what is the impact is that having on the workforce, I mean, they are critical to service delivery, is looking at sickness, absence, and recruitment and retention. Now, we know that other parts of the very near local authorities pay, enhanced rates for some of their social care professionals relative to what we can pay. So we have to provide them, if you like, a very good, supportive environment to work in so we don't lose our very good staff. And I think some of the improvements we've seen, and I think we'll see them in this year in terms of the sickness rates, is testament to the time that officers and members give to frontline professionals, from myself right down to the front line. I think that's critical to try and retain that supportive environment for people who are doing difficult jobs. We know there are less staff, and we know the financial pressures mean we have to be much tougher on decommissioning. If something isn't giving us what we thought it would, we have to be tough and say we no longer want that service. It isn't a high priority for us. New models of support are going to be needed, and particularly looking at things like see if we can improve how many people use a direct payment, where they have a financial payment if they meet our eligibility criteria, and they go off and source their own support needs. And I think we've got to be a bit more creative and try and push some of that. So that's what we're trying to do. Staff training, again, I wanted to emphasise that. As the statutory director, I'm not only responsible for our own staff, but I have to ensure that the workforce out there in the provider community, independent and third sector, wherever we're commissioning a service, also are supported in terms of their own staff development and quality of service. So, it's not just good enough to look at your own workforce. And as most of our services are commissioned, that's almost a key part of that responsibility. So our relationship with providers is critical. It's no good just looking at it as a contractual money transfer. We've got to be working in partnership because we're dealing with individual people's lives when they're at their most vulnerable. So that's the whole context, and that's our strategic approach. And how did we do? Well, we have continued to maintain and improve support to our most vulnerable citizens. I think as a council, that is a priority for you. We've already decided. We've done a lot of work on improving demand management in adult services. We've developed an adult hub, and what we're trying to do is give a right first-time response. So we make sure we have very experienced professionals answering that very first telephone call or inquiry. And for some things where, for example, a small piece of equipment that may now be readily available in many retail stores, previously, people would have come to the council, would have gone through a long, protracted wait for an assessment, then have an assessment done, only to be told, yes, this is what you need, a simple piece of equipment, maybe to use a kettle better or whatever. And they'd be in our system, and we'd be almost smothering them with kindness, overdoing the support bit. Now, there's a professional judgment made, and if we think somebody's capable of buying a piece of equipment, they just don't know, where is that equipment, where do I get it? We'll tell them on the phone, they go straight away, we may not see them again for several years. So we're really trying to streamline, rather than be too paternalistic, which I think has been the tradition previously, and give people that empowerment really that they want. But that is, quite hard work. And then, the available budget, I've already mentioned that. Each spend decision, which is made by a frontline practitioner every time you commission a service or give something to somebody, relies on that engagement that the frontline are focused on the money as well as the quality of the service. I never want them to think about the money first. I always want them to think about the outcome for the individual, but they have to have in their mind a business head, if you like. If we can do this and it costs £10, or we can do that and it's £50 and you get the same outcome, I want them to choose the £10 option. I think if you translate some of those little decisions at that kind of simple level to people, they start to understand that every saving of £40 accumulates to help us balance that budget. But that is, a new way of working for lots of people who've been used to working in councils maybe of times of plenty for 20, 30 years. So to try and get that change in behaviour is a significant management challenge. Improved many of our performance indicators, and the ones I think where I'd like to highlight notable improvements are delayed transfers of care. Again, you remember 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer now, we were the worst in Wales. We are managing to maintain those relatively low levels, and that is a constant pressure for us. Disabled facilities grants, I'm really pleased that we've turned the curve there in terms of numbers of days. I know members found that a challenge, having to always keep asking me, why can't we improve it, why can't we improve it? We've spent an awful lot of time really looking at that whole process and improving, so I think we'll see that coming down. Initial child protection conferences, again, I reassured members previously that that didn't mean children weren't safe. What we hadn't done was go through the formal statutory process within the timescales. We always had a safety plan in place for children, but when you're being measured and compared across Wales, these are the sort of statistics that don't make Torfaen not look very good. So we've had some good improvements there. And again, similarly with childcare plans. This is about making sure we get the workforce understanding that it's no good just seeing the family and supporting the family. You have to evidence in the DRAIG and the care plan system that you've done that, you've done a risk assessment, and that writing of the report is as important as delivering the service. Again, that's a different mindset. It's all about providing our evidence, and we're measured, quite rightly. The public expect us to be comparable with others. The family focus team, that's where we're really trying to look at some of our early intervention to prevent people needing a looked after children status. And any of you who have been involved in the corporate parenting panelling work will know, once they become a formal looked after child, there's a whole set of legal and operational processes that have to be followed. So if we can try and work earlier, try and do something sooner, we've been investing in that now for the last few years, so early indications are good. We want to give it another year to really test out, is it something we really want to keep, and then transfer budget to make sure that it's sustainable. Transition planning, again, that's when somebody who's been a child receiving social care support, moving into adulthood, and this isn't just peculiar to Torfaen, all across Wales, because they're run by different legislative frameworks, different social workers supporting those individuals. Sometimes we haven't been good as authorities in giving that transition a robust, smooth process. So we're getting much better at doing some of that now, with a named adult social worker for each child who is likely to need support, usually a child with a disability, once they reach 14, 15. So we're trying to get much earlier in that pathway to manage that transition. Because what we want to do is, once you're a child, you need support, you need safeguarding, you need things wrapped around you. We want to help those individuals and young people become much more independent as much as they can be. So let go of the reins a bit. And, that transition, it's difficult enough for all of us as parents with a child who doesn't have disabilities or complex needs. But it's a difficult balancing act. The adult duty pod, we've had some really good results there, early indications again that is starting to keep some of that demand and divert it elsewhere. But we'll do a formal review during this year to again make some decisions on whether that will be a permanent arrangement. The Regional Safeguarding Board, we were recognised by Welsh Government as having an efficient early start. We were up and ready before last April when we had to have the thing started, and we've made sure our local arrangements still ensure that local accountability across the agencies. So we're not just saying over to the regional board, we're still maintaining our local responsibilities. The statement of intent for older people with complex needs published. I mean, I took a personal role in that, in leading that on behalf of the 5 local authorities and the Health Board, and certainly the Older Persons Commissioner recognised it as one of the most holistic ones she'd seen, where I included things like carers where other people hadn't. I included things like housing and the impact on older people where other areas hadn't. So recognised that that was a good piece of work. We've secured a transformation fund for Gwent last year, and we've been using that to help us start thinking about how do we redesign these new service models and different ways of working. So we try and design it once for Gwent, if it suits, and then you adapt it locally if you need to. And again, an intermediate care bid developed for Gwent. We host the Transition Fund in Torfaen, and Caerphilly host the Intermediate Care Fund. And we're getting much better, I think, as the 5 directors in the Greater Gwent area are at sharing some of the responsibility and the workload out. And I think it is, some of the only way we're going to survive in the future. Raised awareness of autism via the local autism stakeholder group. I want to give credit to Ruth Derrick in particular. She's the head of Children's Service. She's taken a personal interest and lead in that, and really trying to raise the need of people with autism up the agenda to make sure we pay attention. And one of the good things that has come out of that piece of work is a new group, and some of the members may have gone to the member seminar where we shared some of this, the Wednesday Warriors. Again, listening to people, what is it they want to support them live a better fulfilled life. Think about it in a completely different way. It isn't a service or attending a day centre. If we can do something different, that's one of those areas where I think we've listened to what people have said, we've raised the profile and we've changed and adapted. Increasing the number of young people receiving restorative justice disposal, and that's to working with the YOS service, Youth Offending Service, to try and avoid people becoming, a criminal history and having a criminal sanction, and that's been working well. Right sizing of care packages, again, I've told you about that before, and that's very challenging for individual frontline staff trying to negotiate that change with individuals. Eligibility I've already mentioned, and the integrated assessment, that was a new requirement for the Welsh Government issued to us during last year, that we had to abandon the unified assessment, again something that people have been working on for 10 years, put that in the bin and start working on this integrated assessment. The integrated assessment is to stop people getting the runaround. If people have health and social care needs, you have one assessment done, we don't have to keep repeating the same information. So it's the right thing to do, but obviously managing that change across a wide workforce, that's the area, that's where it's a challenge. Adult practice reviews, again, pay tribute here to Jill Pratlett. She's taken a particular lead on behalf of Gwent. So we're in the Gwent area, we are doing this on behalf of Wales. We're piloting this new adult practice review, which will replace serious case reviews in the future. And it's following a similar line to what's been happening in the child protection framework. We've now got education and police professionals in our multi-agency safeguarding unit. That's been seen as good practice, recognised by others. Other people are looking. We'd already made the decision to combine the safeguarding unit for children and adults a couple of years ago now, and this is developing that multi-agency theme. So again, individuals with complex needs, where there's real vulnerability and safeguarding issues, we pool our resources and intelligence and try and deal with things in a systematic way. I was quite pleased with the survey, the feedback we had from carers when we did our survey last year. Again, there's more information in the report, but I just picked out the ones where those people responded and said they thought things were excellent. And you can see 59% of people, as an example, rated the direct payment service excellent. And if you think about the freedom that gives somebody, where we assess them and they have a need, and instead of us designing a service for them and saying, you go there, you do this, we give them the money, they sort out their arrangements themselves. It's much more empowering. It means they can be much more flexible. If the person they're caring for happens to be ill on the day they chose to do something, they still have that voucher, that cash in their hand. They can do something at a different time. I think it's treating people a bit more like adults than maybe previously we've done. So I won't highlight all of those there. So in reflection for me, I think it's been a period of challenge and demands, but I think we have risen to the challenge with several improvements. And, just to put on record here, none of that would be possible without the support of staff, without the support of colleagues across the council, members of the council and the parties. So my thank you to all of you really for that support. The impact of poverty, again, I think we can't overemphasise that. Who'd have thought 5 years ago we'd have food banks in Torfaen and other parts of Wales? It is shocking, really. And, that impact then comes on demand for services. And changing to demographics, there will always be new technologies that will mean more people will survive incredible illnesses, disabilities, life events. But it does mean that more will be needed to support those with those most complex needs. So final slide, priorities for next year. I think it is much more about that collaboration with the wider public service. And when I say public service, I include all of those community groups, third sector, it's the whole shebang, to make sure we can improve access to universal service so well-being is enhanced and people only come to social care when their needs are so acute and that they need that statutory support at that time. It will be interesting to see the work that we're doing corporately to look at demand management. What can we do to reduce the need for looked after children's status? In terms of early intervention, prevention, what can other agencies do? And hopefully we'll get some learning there. The other thing I wanted to highlight to you is, I'm not going to go into the detail, there's more detail in the report, but a new case law at the end of last year about deprivation of liberty. And, that's calling on much more stringent processes to be put in place for a whole range of people that previously we wouldn't use this legal framework for. And obviously we're working across Wales and with Welsh Government and WLGA to try and look at what is the impact of that. But just to give you an example, Cardiff have done an assessment, and if they had to apply what's called DOLS, deprivation of liberty process, it would cost them over £1 million extra for the people they've already got in the system now. So you can see, it would cost us maybe half of that. And for the on-call payments, and that is where traditionally, if somebody has needed support maybe in a group living situation, but we could arrange, if you like, what we call sleeping nights, so a night cover, but only if something goes wrong, that person would then be paid, and you would just give them a holding fee. Now there is more and more demand, and there's case law, that even if those people are sleeping, you need to still pay them the full wage as if they were up and active around and doing things. And again, if you look at Cardiff, the cost that they've estimated of that, if that gets enacted, that's another £500,000. So, as well as the demand pressures, some of these legal changes and these case law means we have to be able to respond and adjust our budgets to meet some of those new requirements. Obviously, continuous improvement. One of the things I think I'm proud of as a council, generally, I think we demonstrate this, and certainly within the service area I lead, is the mindset about continuous improvement. I think it is there. We are willing to sort of say when we haven't quite got it right and say, OK, let's have a look at this, let's investigate. We don't brush things under the carpet. And I think you see that mindset from the front line, right up to Alison, right up to the leader. It is there in terms of that wanting to do the best we can with the resources we have. And the final comment there is, for next year, I've put it in bold because it is massive. The new Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act, and if I had my housing hat on as well, I'd be saying the same about the 2 housing bills coming in. But that is a massive change agenda, a transformation about the way things are done. And, it's going to impact on all of us, on citizens. Even understanding what the changes mean is going to be a big job. And we have to work in tandem with Welsh Government as they're developing the regulations, the changes in rules. We'll have to start getting those messages around. I'll be bringing various things to you as members so you understand the changes, so that when your citizens come to you, you'll be able to help them with some of their understanding. So that will be a massive job. And particularly the bit about well-being. They called it the Social Services and Wellbeing Bill, and they're looking for directors of social services to lead on that. But obviously, I've already said, we rely on a whole load of other public sector bodies in the council and outside the council to look at some of that wellbeing universal services. So although, I may be leading the implementation of it in Torfaen, it will be a corporate approach to make sure we get the best in terms of the resources we'll have available to deliver the requirements of that. So I didn't want to pick out any more particular themes in terms of my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Questions or comments? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for a very comprehensive report. I've read most of it, and you've filled in the gaps that I haven't. I'd like to congratulate you, yourself and your officers for doing what I think is an excellent job in difficult circumstances with less funding to be able to do it. On that point, you say in the report that you've had to make a saving of £2.6 million, and you've also achieved a slight underspend as well. So I really congratulate you on that. I'm particularly encouraged to hear that the disabled facilities grants are improving, because that's always been a concern of mine in recent years, as has the DTOs as well, delayed transfers of care. I'm happy to see that improving. Happy to see that the fostering is going really, really well, and I'm very, very happy with the whole report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Morby.
First, I better declare I'm a member of the Iron Health Board, because I want to talk about delayed transfers of care, which is a topic which is actually being reported to the Health Board tomorrow. And I'm really pleased that although delayed transfers of care generally, as far as Gwent is concerned, are a problem, and they're problems for the individuals as well, not just the bureaucracies involved. In Torfaen, we are doing well comparatively. We could do better, and hopefully we will do better. But in terms of numbers, as Sue has indicated, our numbers seem to be reducing. Elsewhere, not so good. Just south and just to the west, not doing too well at all. So it's one of those occasions where, when that is discussed at the Health Board, I'll be glad that I'm from Torfaen and not worrying about it. So thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? Or Councillor Cunningham?
Yeah, can I just pick up, and I wanted to say what Stuart Evans said, but he always beats everybody in thanking you for the report, how comprehensive it was. And it was, in all fairness, and that's typical of Sue Evans, isn't it, to give us a comprehensive report. But if I could pick up on the detox, if I could, because I know with your delayed transfer of care, social services are very good, if not excellent, to get people back in their own homes. I've had a family experience of that. You get the package together, you get people back home. But what I find is confusing, it must be confusing for other people, where the responsibility of the hospital stops and where the responsibility of social services stop when you need to get somebody into EMI, for instance. Because very often it's confusing for us lay people to know, because you speak to the hospital, oh, that's the social services responsibility, or Vicky Verky, as they say. So if you could just explain where that responsibility starts and ends for both sort of organisations.
Okay. The easiest way to describe it is thinking in terms of an individual patient. Sorry? It is on, isn't it? Yeah, it is on. I'll go nearer. The clinical decision about when somebody is safe to be transferred, to have their transfer of care, has to be a medical decision, a clinical decision. But that could be a transfer of care from, say, an acute hospital like the Royal Gwent to a hospital where they may have rehabilitation, say, at somewhere like County Hospital in Griffithstown. So that's still within the NHS's responsibility. Once they are deemed to no longer require NHS-managed care, so where they've had all their acute phase, they're as well as they can be from a medical or clinical point of view. This is where social services have the responsibility, working with health board colleagues, ward staff, to think about, is that individual able to go home safely? And there may be a period of transition and rehabilitation. That's where we would use services like the frailty service that I presented previously, to try and see, can they manage at home if you perhaps have some equipment brought to them, some adaptations done, so it links into the DFG comment earlier. And that is a joint discussion about community-based health staff and social care staff testing out, can that person manage at home? Can we do a trial? Because what we don't want to do is send people into care homes and institutions unnecessarily. But for some people, it is actually the right place for them to be and the right decision for them. It is the safest environment for them. There's two complications. If they have what's called continuing healthcare needs, that means that their primary need is likely to be very complex, likely to be very changing, and it needs to be overseen by a clinician. They still stay within the responsibility of the NHS, and the NHS would have to secure the care home bed and commission that and pay for that care home bed. And in those cases, individuals don't pay any contribution towards that cost because the NHS is always free at the point of delivery. If, however, they don't require that level of need, but they still need nursing care, that falls over to social services, and we make the arrangements to work with the family to assess what are their actual needs, which homes are capable of providing the support to meet those needs. Do those homes have vacancies? And this is where the delayed transfers of care come in. It sometimes takes a while to negotiate with a family to choose a home that isn't their first choice because there won't be a vacancy. And that's a balance, fine balancing act. We're not dealing with widgets here. This is not discharging people at the end of a production line. As Brian said, when you make a decision on somebody going into a care home, that's a life-changing decision. It's an important decision, and although we may be criticised for keeping people in a hospital bed longer than is strictly necessary for medical care, what I wouldn't want to see is, the NHS just saying you have to leave because you're medically fit, without that proper joint approach to saying where is the best place for that individual, and who funds it. That comes later. The priority should be what's that person's needs, how best can we meet them. Let the managers worry about the money later on. But we've got to be clear with individuals. I think this is something we don't do as well as we might. If they're coming into social care, so they're not under the umbrella of NHS continuing healthcare, we've got to be upfront straight away that there will be a financial assessment and they will have to make a financial contribution towards the cost of that care. And I think that's sometimes why family disputes happen, because they haven't understood that suddenly they will move from having support and care in a hospital environment, all fully funded, and suddenly now their needs are still the same, but they now have to pay for some of the costs. Because what we charge individuals comes nowhere near the cost of what it actually costs to fund that placement. So hopefully that's explained a bit better for you. Thank you.
Councillor Morby.
Can I just add to that roughly half of the instances where there are delayed transfers of care are to facilitate patient and family choice. And that's very important for the reasons Sue has already alluded to, but there is a cost in that. That's one of the difficulties, I suppose, where you have potentially a conflict within a family about what is the best. The patient is perhaps the last person to be considered in those circumstances, which is unfortunate, shall we say. But what we need to focus on, obviously, as a council, is to make sure that we have procedures in place to minimise people staying in inappropriate hospital settings when they should be in the community receiving social care. And I think we are doing better than that than we have in the fairly recent past. So that's the good news.
Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, so other end of this spectrum, I'm detecting from people, obviously, with the cuts that we're getting, as also the new benefit regime, and also the current stuff on the news now about young people not getting into housing because of the pressure coming from that direction. What problems are you experiencing as a service about getting young disabled people into accommodation with support, obviously, and noting that you also get problems with direct payments and things. Because I recognise that the transition stage is probably quite a difficult one for you.
Yeah, that is one of the most challenging areas that we face, I think. We know there isn't enough housing stock available for people who would want to rent, particularly in the borough, particularly from RSL, so we know there's a long waiting list there. You may have people stuck in a hospital environment. We're trying to prioritise giving them an adapted property or putting equipment in. And it is a constant challenge and a balancing act between who is the highest priority, whether it's looking at it from a social care point of view, looking at it from a housing point of view. And what we always use is that risk assessment. The risk assessment has to be what determines the priority for the front line. And we let other senior managers worry about how we fund it, how we budget and move money around to make things happen. We can't let those individual practitioners go against their professional judgment. That's what we're relying on to keep people safe out in the community. So, it is a difficult one. There isn't enough resource, readily available properties, fully adapted as we would like. But, we're working with our RSLs to identify where they are, try and ring-fence them, so that when somebody no longer needs an adapted property, we help them move into maybe a two-bedroom flat or a general property, so that we can free up some of that property. But again, we're talking about very emotional things. Somebody may have been in that house for 20 years looking after a loved one with complex needs. That loved one has died. We're suddenly asking them to up sticks and move to somewhere else for our convenience. That's what they would see it as. So it is a hard negotiation that we have to do, and we treat each case on an individual basis.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sue, my question is, you mentioned in your presentation about the Transformation Fund, which we are managing for Gwent. Is that correct?
It is for Gwent, yeah.
Could you give us a bit more information about the fund, what it's used for? Will we be able to apply for this funding in the future?
It's one of these frustrating but welcome funds that, they're only given us on an annual basis, and that's one of the biggest frustrations for it. So for last year, we used it for a whole range of activities that we undertook around Gwent, one of them being the carer survey that I mentioned, and where we looked across Gwent, particularly trying to focus on GPs to see. One of the things that came out, I presented previously to you, was the carers measure a few years ago. And one of the aims of that measure is to try and identify carers sooner, because we know there's an awful lot of carers out there who never come to social care for support. By focusing our attention on GPs, where we think people are likely to perhaps identify somebody who potentially has a heavy caring burden, money is used through that measure to support GPs in giving more information. What we wanted to do, and we used some of the Transformation Fund to do this, was to survey GPs right across Gwent to see, has the information we've provided them with and the training they've had been useful? Has the literature been helpful? Have they identified more carers, and what else could we do? So as well as the information I've provided to you there on an assessment of how our own services support carers, we're trying to get that wider picture of how else can we identify carers sooner, because prevention is better, obviously. But there's a whole list of other areas. I can send you that separately. For this year's fund, literally last week while I was on holiday, we actually had the announcement that the fund was available again this year. And there are strict requirements on what needs to be done and put in place to have that fund. At this stage, we don't know if any funds will be available next year, but we're hoping that we can persuade Welsh Government that some of the work we've been doing, and if you think about it, as what we're trying to do is put the building blocks in place ready to implement that act. So we're trying to look at things like alternative models, what can we do to make the care home sector more sustainable. And this, you remember previously I've brought to Cabinet the joint governance framework that we're designing. that is directly in line with the requirements of this Transformation Fund. By next January, all local authority partners working with the Health Board and relevant others will have to set up a joint strategic framework for planning and commissioning health and social care services. And you know that I've been leading on that in the Gwent area for the last couple of months. So we'll use that to appoint people to help us with that journey. It's 250,000 for the whole of Gwent. So it isn't about life-changing things, but if we can appoint good people who can help us think differently, think creatively, challenge the status quo, that's really what we need. People with a background in social care, a knowledge of what's happening, a background in the health service as well, to really help us make this joint governance framework a reality, so it adds value and it doesn't become just a talking shop. So that's what we'll be using the majority of this year's money for.
Thank you, Sue. You left the best to last. I wanted to know how much the value of the fund was, so thank you for that. Thank you, Mike.
Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Sue, for your presentation. My question relates to TIPS, the Torfaen Young People's Support Service. I believe it's moved from the town centre now to Old Cwmbran.
Right.
Are the youth still, or the young people still finding it okay to travel there, because it was placed in the town centre as it was a major drop-off point for the bus service and things?
Yeah, actually, that was one of the risks we took when we moved it. There were two primary reasons why we moved it. One was economic. The rental costs being in the town centre was much more significant than being placed. I'm going to call it Stadium House. It's not Stadium House, but it's near the stadium. The other was to improve the links with the stadium. We wanted to get much more of a well-being and health focus on the lifestyle choices that those young people would make. So, working with Sally Church and the Leisure Trust, we're trying to forge some strong links there. It's about getting people ready for a good, active, healthy life. So as well as thinking about their housing need, their job need, it's also starting to think about lifestyle. And we haven't seen any negative impact. People are still using that service. And again, it's about independence. We shouldn't expect everything to be on your doorstep. Once you become an adult, you should expect to have to catch a bus now and again to go somewhere. We're not going to be able to provide everything on everybody's doorstep. So, that was a strategic decision we made. It's had an economic benefit. We haven't seen a negative benefit in terms of numbers. It's fairly easy. We want people to walk from the town centre, quite frankly, to get there. It's only a 15-minute walk. It's not insurmountable.
Thank you,
Can I
Leader.
just add to that? But I understand Councillor Seaborn's concern. The reality is that most of the youngsters are in the town centre. They go there naturally. And I think for them to go over to the stadium means that extra effort. I understand what Sue was saying as well, that they're supposed to be grown up and they're supposed to go and look for these services themselves. So what I'd like to have is a report come back to us to see whether moving from the town centre to the leisure centre has actually impacted in terms of the number of youngsters that are actually attending and making the inquiries.
I can provide that, that's no problem.
Okay, I'm going to bring Councillor Clark in, Richard Clark.
Can I just deal with the last issue first? The PIs for the number of people receiving a service in the age group that's covered by TIPS has actually increased last year, so I would suggest in terms of what we're actually doing in the building is more successful than where it was before. I'm going to mention in a moment that I've managed to go to the majority of where we provide social care in the borough. And one of the questions I specifically, I think Councillor Seaborn had alerted me to this issue, and if it wasn't him, somebody else did, on a previous occasion. And one of the things I asked one of the young people at the centre was, does it make a difference to yourself? And their answer was they don't want to be labelled. If they're in the town centre with their friends and they're going into a building, their friends say, well, why have you got to go in there? What are you doing in there? And they're suddenly labelled as social care. And sadly, that label isn't always, you're a problem because you're with social care, which isn't the case, but their peers label them. So they were quite glad of the move. But Sue's assured you that she'll do a report. I just wanted to give you some anecdotal advice there. I would recommend members take some time during the recess to actually read the report. I think it's a very honest reflection of the complexities and the breadth of social care and what we provide within Torfaen. I will say it is actually readable. Some of these documents we're all presented with, you sort of lose the will to live after 2 pages. I'm not saying you won't lose the will to live after 2 pages of this, but it's certainly readable and that won't put you off. Sue pays tribute to our staff. Again, I've had the fortune, benefit and delight of going out and meeting our staff in their locations, seeing how they are integrating with healthcare staff, being co-located, and actually speaking to the other people where they first moved into certain buildings. Health was over one side, social care was over the other, and how they've mingled and sit next to each other nowadays, which is going to be a better service for the people of Torfaen. I pay credit to our staff. I think they put in 120%, and their care and their focus is on the residents of Torfaen. I jokingly said to one, well, we'll give you extra social workers. Keith Rutherford, I think, nearly collapsed when I suggested that, with an eye to the budget. But the senior officer turned around to me and said, well, it's like roads. You build more roads, you'll have more traffic on them. You won't get the caseloads down by doing that. You'll just increase caseloads. So Sue's told you some of the innovative ways by managing demand and matters such as that we're looking at those. I think if you read the report and the PIs that come out of it, I think we're beginning to nail the myth that frailty is fealty. And I really hope nobody in this chamber ever falls into the trap of calling it fealty. It really is making a difference and making a difference to our communities. We've mentioned DFGs. You know, we've still got work to do on those. It's a pleasure to see those come down. It's my first question to Jo Prattlett as she walked through my door for the briefings. We still have more work to do on those. But again, to commend Sue, very comprehensive presentation, very comprehensive report. Please take the time to read it and understand what the service provides for you and for the residents of Torfaen.
Councillor Rees just indicated.
Thanks for that, Richard. Sue Evans mentioned earlier the £10 option. How do we know that the £10 option has been spent in the local economy?
We only send them to local shops. We don't send them to Birmingham. You know, they are shops that are in the Cwmbran, Pontypool area.
Okay. Right, members. The recommendations are shown on page 40 of your agenda. Can I have a show of hands, please? Room 4. Okay, thank you. Members, that's agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Move on to agenda item 10, appointments to the Members' Constitution Working Party. Delith Harris, Deputy Monitoring Officer, can you present your report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek nominations and appoint further members to the Members' Constitution Working Party. The size of the Working Party is a minimum of 4 members and a maximum of 7 on a cross-party basis. At the recent annual meeting of the Council, only 4 members were appointed. There were 3 from the Labour group, and they were Councillors Ashley, Hunt and Morby, and 1 from the Independent group, Councillor Haynes. In June, Council approved the commencement of work on the Model Constitution, and members will recall that they acknowledged the need to consider membership further. So Council may now wish to consider appointing to 1 or more of the 3 vacant seats on the Working Party, having regard to the need for cross-party representation. So the recommendation is that Council, and it's up to them to appoint a member or up to 3 members to the Constitution Working Party, up to its full complement of 7 members on a cross-party basis. So we're just asking for nominations. Thank you, Madam.
I move Councillor Jeffries, Madam Mayor.
The nomination seconded? Okay, can I have a show of hands for Councillor Rees? Okay, That's unanimous. Are there any other nominations?
Madam Mayor, could I propose Councillor Graham Smith?
Is that nomination seconded?
No, Madam Mayor, can I move that when the request came from Councillor Rees, there was discussions in the majority party. We've agreed on Councillor Jeffries. I suggest that if the Conservatives want to move somebody, then they put it now and it's rediscussed. I personally haven't got any objections to it, but I think that's the process it should go through.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, ma'am.
Right, move on to the next agenda item then. Agenda item 11, Local Authorities Standing Order Wales Amendment Regulations 2014. Delith Harris, Deputy Monitoring Officer, can you present this report for us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to require Council to agree to revise the Constitution to incorporate changes to its standing orders insofar as necessary to comply with the Local Authority Standing Orders Wales regulations, and these only recently came into force on the 1st of July of this year. I'll summarise just the key changes to the regulations. The first being the removal of reference to the Mayor and Council Executive and alternative arrangement models. This isn't relevant in Torfaen. The addition of the Head of Democratic Services post to those that require a committee and an independent person to decide on disciplinary action and to investigate allegations of misconduct. What this means is that the role of the Head of Democratic Services is now to be given the same protection as the Head of Paid Service, the Monitoring Officer and the Chief Financial Officer as regards the process under which local authorities can take disciplinary action against them and how any allegation of misconduct is dealt with. And that process does involve an investigating committee and, if a case is found to answer, an independent person to investigate. The other changes are we are now required to publicly advertise all Chief Officer posts where the annual remuneration is £100,000 or greater, unless the appointment is for a period of less than 12 months. There's also the addition of the Head of Democratic Services Monitoring Officer post to the list of those that are not subject to appointment or dismissal by the Head of Paid Service. Currently, the responsibility for the appointment or dismissal of the monitoring officer already lies with Council, so the regulations now extend this to the Head of Democratic Services. And finally, decisions to determine or vary Chief Officer remuneration are now to be made by full Council. So the recommendation, members, is that the Council approves these changes and also delegates authority to the Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer to make the necessary changes to the Constitution in consultation with the members' Constitution Working Party. Thank you, Madam.
I move that, Madam Mayor.
Okay, everyone for? Okay, thank you, members. That's unanimous and agreed. Okay, agenda item 12, Wales Audit Office, Performance Audit Work Plan and Fees for the 2014-15 financial year. This item has been deferred to a future council meeting when a representative of the Wales Audit Office will be available to answer members' questions. Move on to agenda item 13, member question time. There are 4 members' questions for today. The questions are shown on a sheet circulated. Sorry. Right, first question. Councillor Colette Thomas, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The grassroots community bus has now been in operation in Hentless for 12 months. Could the executive member please give an update?
Okay, Councillor John Cunningham, Executive Member for Neighbourhood Services. Should I like to answer that question?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. As you say, grassroots has been operating over the past 12 months and extremely successful, I'm very pleased to say. This pre-bookable door-to-door service saw an increase in passenger figures at the start of the service, and relatively consistent patronage numbers thereafter. The current operation serves the former area covered by Service 25. However, considerations to expand the service to meet the needs of others, as well as those who are currently using the service, are currently being explored. New destination points will also form part of these deliberations. I can inform you that we have recently received concerns from Hentless Community Council regarding whether or not passenger numbers were sufficient to make this service sustainable. At this time, we were able to respond positively and reassure the Community Council there are no current proposals to remove this service, and in fact, we are looking to improve and develop it.
A supplementary question?
Are there comparable passenger numbers that you could give to members, please?
Well, I can, but I have to take notice of that question because I haven't got those figures. I'll respond in writing.
Can I just say it's very pleasing to hear that report. There was a great deal of concern in Hentless about the loss of the service bus, and it's very pleasing news that this new bus has been successful. So thank you all the officers for the work involved.
Okay, Councillor Jeffries.
Diolch, Mara. This is a question for Councillor Yao. Why is there a crisis in post-16 education, sixth form funding in Torfaen schools?
Well, Jeff, I welcome your question. I have to take issue with the premise upon which the question is based. I don't believe that we have a crisis. I believe that we have a difficulty at the moment that we're working through. But certainly that difficulty doesn't, in my view, constitute a crisis. Some of the background here. Like all local authorities, Torfaen receives post-16 funding from the Wales Government in a direct grant. It's then the responsibility of the local authority to distribute the fixed sums to schools with sixth form provision by way of a locally agreed funding formula. There is a very small retention of this funding by the local authority to support administration and management of the grant. This amounts to some £16,000 of an allowable retention of up to £126,000. This rate compares very favourably with all other LAs. All other sixth form funding is of course passed on to the schools. The LA consults with schools annually in order to keep the distribution methodology under review. This process has always been supported and welcomed by the schools forum and head teachers alike. Change for this financial year that has caused some issues is twofold. First of all, the grant funding from WAG has been reduced by £360,000 down to £4.2 million. At the same time, pupil numbers and post-16 activities increased in Torfaen. WAG didn't notify LAs of the revised sums or the changes in their methodology for these allocations until February this year. A combination of these factors resulted in late notification of funding to schools, as well as reduced allocations in all but one school. This could not be predicted in advance, and consequently schools were left in a difficult position with both their financial planning and with matching expenditure levels to funding streams. Some schools have experienced more difficulty than others with this situation, but we are working with them to ease them through this difficult time.
Supplementary.
Thanks for that. Looking forward then, what do you intend to do about the formula that's currently being used to distribute funds amongst Torfaen secondary schools that have a sixth form?
Can you use your mic? Sorry, Councillor.
Several things. In consultation with the schools forum and secondary school heads, we reviewed the current WAG formula and decided not to use it. And for the coming academic session, 2014-2015, we'll be using a locally determined formula. WAG's new formula we've decided not to use because we believe it's too clumsy. It bases itself on a 3-year average prediction of need, which we believe is neither safe nor indeed robust enough going forward to allocate funding to particular or individual schools. This concern is shared on an all Wales level, so it's not just us who take this view of that. For the future, discussions will be in train between ADU, that's the Association of Directors of Education in Wales, and the WAG government, in order to find and develop a respected and fit-for-purpose funding formula for the future, and hopefully we can do that to set that particular funding mechanism in place for the 2015-16 academic year and moving forward. Excuse me. Running concurrently with this particular process, Darren Joseph, one of the senior officers in the Education Department, will be undertaking a consultation process with heads of schools of post-16 provision or providers with a view to establishing and revising the locally determined funding formula. Now, this two-pronged approach, we believe, will result in hopefully a fit-for-purpose mechanism for allocating funds to post-16 providing schools that currently we have to say that we don't necessarily enjoy at the moment. Hopefully, as a consequence of this process during the next 12 months, we'll have a degree of clarity and a degree of robustness and develop a system that is indeed safe, because currently we haven't got that.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Seaborn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the leader give an explanation for the downtime of the VPN Citrix system on the 14th and 15th of July with disruption to members and officers who were unable to carry out their duties?
Thank you, Councillor Seaborn. I have in the past explained, not on one occasion, certainly on numerous occasions over the last month and indeed over a couple of years, that I don't sit on the SRS and indeed have never sat on the SRS. However, within the last couple of months, we've appointed Anthony Hunt to the SRS, and he attends their meetings and understands on an operational basis what takes place and what doesn't take place. So I'll ask Anthony to answer that question.
Thank you, Leader. On the night of Sunday the 13th, the 6 email servers in Torvine all had security updates applied to them. We have to apply updates to keep Torvine secure and to ensure that we meet our code of connection obligations to allow us to be connected to government secure services such as revenues and benefits. On the morning of Monday the 14th, it became apparent that these security updates, after being applied, caused an issue that stopped users connecting to their mailboxes. It took the engineers until 8:50 in the morning to resolve this issue. However, we then experienced a recurrence that took just until before 11 to resolve. At no point were there VPN issues or Citrix issues. The only issue we experienced was this mail issue, which may have felt like a VPN or Citrix issue due to some users being unable to open Outlook. It did not impact key council systems such as Drag, Financials or Mayrise. Early on Tuesday morning, we had a recurring issue with a single mail server which hosted the mailboxes for users with the surnames beginning with A, R and S, which would have felt like an ongoing issue if they had not used mail on Monday afternoon. The system obviously has a sense of humour with its spelling. This was again related to security patches, and we had to roll back a security patch to restore services for this single box. The SOS recognises that these issues are service disrupting, and they've restored service both times as soon as possible and in well under the service level the system sits within. The process of security patching is a difficult balance between security against stability, and everything possible is done to implement patches out of hours for the least disruption to members and officers. And in this case, it unfortunately impacted on business hours, which we understand is not how it should happen.
Who's supplementary?
No, if I could just say, if I could apologise to the leader, because my question was to the executive member for resources, but on the bottom of my question, to be answered by the leader as per his portfolio. So I do apologise, leader.
No need to apologise, Councillor Seaborn. The facts are the facts.
Okay. Councillor Jeffreys, your question.
Then I'll direct this question to Councillor Hunt. Shall I say will the leader, or shall I say Councillor Hunt? I think I'll say Councillor Hunt for now, anyway. Will Councillor Hunt provide an update around developments in the SRS?
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Rees, for the question. As the leader said before, I've been appointed now to the SRS board. I attended my first meeting earlier this month and look forward to getting my teeth into the board meetings and representing members on those. The SRS attended a resources and overview and scrutiny committee meeting on June the 25th and presented around a number of areas and developments. The presentation was followed up by 18 questions from the scrutiny committee and a number of follow-up questions. The SRS are also due to bring a paper to September Cabinet with a regular 6-monthly update, which I'm sure he'll read with interest.
Move supplementary.
My supplementary is sort of related to activities around the SRS, and I understand that he's new to the position, so I'd be quite happy to take a written response to this question. How much money has the council lost as a direct result of the court case recently won by a senior officer of this council?
Okay, I'll need to consult with the legal and monitoring officer and offer a written response to that question.
Yeah, I think it's inappropriate, quite frankly, that Councillor Hunt should be placed in a position to answer a question of that nature, because he wasn't sitting on the SRS when these issues occurred. I also note that when I'm reading this answer that Councillor Hunt just gave, he talked about the SRS is also due to bring a paper to the September Cabinet, which is the regular 6-monthly update. Now, Councillor Rees doesn't sit on the Cabinet. I think what Councillor Rees is asking for is an explanation for the Council about the procedures and what has taken place, and I think it's appropriate that that takes place. So, not only should they bring a report back to the Cabinet, but the Council should also have an opportunity to understand those issues and to debate them in a proper manner.
Right, we're moving on to agenda item 14, date of next meeting. For your information, members, the ordinary council meeting will take place on the 23rd of September at 10 a.m. in the council chamber. Agenda item 15, cabinet decisions, the 8th of July and B, the 15th of July. Members, the cabinet decisions on the 8th of July start on page 101 and the decisions made on 15th of July 2014 were published on the 15th of July. There were no challenges to the decisions made on the 8th of July. We have a challenge to one decision made on the 15th of July regarding Pontnewydd Primary School, and a council overview and scrutiny committee will be held today to discuss this. Do members have any questions on any of the other decisions made on the 15th of July? No? All okay to note the decisions? Yes? Thank you, members. The decisions are noted. Right, that's the end of the council meeting. I suggest we have a short comfort break and we'll reconvene the overview and scrutiny meeting in, say, 10, 15 minutes. Are everybody okay with everyone? Yeah? Okay. Thank you, members, for your attendance and contributions. Can I remind you to sign the attendance register if you haven't already done so, and the personal interests on the form as well. Thank you.